The network is used, probably some of the typical applications you'd think of, online learning, distance education, being used for administrative operations within the schools, within the constituents, being used for improving communication between the schools and the parents. We're also seeing healthcare is probably where we're seeing the biggest growth and utilization on the network, as we're seeing a few years ago. We brought on a teleburn application, and it was connecting these regional critical access hospitals to burn specialists in some of the major cities, and they were using a video type of specialized equipment to, when patients come in and when they're burned, to do an initial assessment and get instructions from a specialist, a burn specialist, and so that they could be treated locally and then transported to a regional hospital. We're also seeing municipalities starting to change the way that they are using the network, and again, pushing more of their services to online and automating bill payments, parking, and those types of applications. So we're seeing a lot of interest in that area. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting is also the change in those online applications. Some of our schools have told us several years ago the notion that a school, an application like YouTube would have been considered, an entertainment. We used to call it arts and entertainment is what was our predominant use of the network. And YouTube would have been considered that. And schools probably, in K-12 schools, they probably would have blocked that. During this last, during President Obama's inauguration and the events leading up to it, we heard from our K-12 schools, YouTube was the #1 application being used within the classroom. And that was because of the digital content and media that was coming. C-SPAN archives pushed out a lot of digital content showing past inaugurations and the history of our government. And schools are starting to use that and adopt that and bring that into the classroom. So again, our schools are facing applications that they used to block. They no longer can block. They have to have that unrestricted access, and of course it takes more bandwidth. Another big application that's popular among our schools is a product called United Streaming. It's Discovery Channel purchased this product a few years ago, and it's a variety of digital content for teachers, and it includes an entire curriculum with lesson plans, all kinds of assignments, and it's built to the learning standards, the state and federal learning standards. And so that is, again, very popular, but it takes bandwidth, and that's a constraint that many of our schools, especially in the rural areas, are struggling with. So no surprise, our challenges are probably the same as many of the other state networks, and it's really bandwidth, bandwidth, bandwidth. And it starts, at the backbone as well as out to last mile. And then we have to increase this capacity on our networks, and we have to do it by reducing our costs or reducing, the per megabit cost. So for many years, going back at least over 8 years, we've been planning on migrating our backbone network to fiber. And for a variety of reasons leading up until now, we haven't made any progress moving in that direction. Although, as of right now, we are starting to, I think we'll have our first strand of fiber lit up by the end of this calendar year, and we'll start to see the wheels move. For the first time in the 10 years that the ICN has been operating, our General Assembly appropriated capital dollars for our network. And that was a big obstacle to get. Capital dollars are usually in Illinois viewed as bricks and mortar. And in fact, some of the language when they issue bonds would preclude spending that money on IT or telecommunications. And so they've made the changes when they've released the bonds and written the language in a certain way, and starting to realize that those are capital investments just as important as roads or buildings to make those investments in infrastructure. So we're pretty excited about those possibilities. The reasons why we'd go to fiber, you all know that. I'm kind of preaching to the choir. But besides increasing capacity and lowering our operating costs, the other advantage is redundancy. And so when you're running a network, the OC48s, OC12s, and there's only probably 3 to 4 carriers in the state that can realistically sell you those type of services. And your backbone network depends on physical diversity routes coming in and out of your POP site. Our options are pretty limited. And we are struggling to find, over the last few years, as we've tried to upgrade our backbone links, we have struggled to find physically diverse routes. So the fiber, not only will it bring those capacities, we can make sure through the engineering where those routes are and make sure we have that redundancy that we need. Last mile connections. So this is a little tougher because we do not own the we completely rely on the carrier networks to bring our customers to our network. And in Illinois, there's probably there's one major carrier that we deal with, but we have 15 to 20 small, independent, local exchange carriers throughout the state. At one time, we had probably 8 or 9 cable companies. I think that's down to about 3 cable companies or 2 dominate all of Illinois. So we've been limited on who are the folks that actually have the facilities. And of course, we want a fiber-based or a wireline last mile connection. We do not use any wireless in our network. Some of our schools use wireless for their wide area networks, but as far as the connection back to us, we stay with wireline. So the big push has been to try and build out Ethernet type connections. And this map, I thought when we were working on our broadband stimulus application, we put together this app, and I thought this map, and I thought it kind of showed you the challenges we're dealing with, and it's average connection speeds of our constituents. And again, keep in mind that 80% of our customers are probably K-12 and libraries. While we do serve higher education and colleges, community colleges, they're the small number. So when you're talking about averages, you're really probably looking here at K-12 and libraries. And this is on a county by county level. And the red area, I'm not sure if you can see the legend, but the red area, that shows those counties where the average connection speed is 2 megs or less. So those are folks, connected at a T1. Then in the yellow areas, those are folks 2 to 5 megs. You see some orange areas, and that starts to get into 5 to 10 megs. And then the green, which you just see a little bit outside of the Chicago area, 10 to 20 megs. So again, looking at how do we increase those last mile speeds, really we have put a lot of effort in working on Ethernet-based services and working with those service providers and trying to develop a service that our customers will sign up for. And this has been involved with really sitting down and talking about speeds. What kind of speeds could they offer, at what prices, and where's that sweet spot that our customers would actually sign up and subscribe to the service, that the speeds and the price are all attractive to them. And then also understanding from the service providers, they have to get a return on their investment if they're going to make those investments and upgrade their central offices. So again, understanding what's that ROI for them. In the case of one of our service providers, they needed 15 customers at every central office in order to start building out the service. So again, we worked with them and kind of mapped things state by state by state, and where we thought we would have 15 takers, and convince them to go ahead and build that out. And it's proven successful. It seems like where they're building it, we are getting the customers to sign up for it. They're getting the return on investment, which allows them to go on to the next central office and the next central office and to make those investments. Some of the cable companies, that was a little interesting over the years to try and bring them to the table and convince them that they had a very valuable asset with their fiber in the ground, and convince them to start selling Ethernet services. I think back to probably 8 or 9 years ago, it was, I think the folks up in Northwestern had reached a deal with the cable company in that area to purchase these Ethernet services. And we ended up even paying the cable company to bring their network into our POP site. We paid for 3-4 years. At the end of 3 or 4 years, we got a little smarter and said, we're not going to pay for that anymore. We're going to convince you that we've got a wonderful opportunity and wonderful set of customers. If you are willing to make that investment, we'll allow you into our POP site, and then you can in turn go out and try and sell these services to our customers. And that has, again, started to work. More and more of our POP sites throughout the state are starting to have where the cable companies have that infrastructure and are beginning to sell Ethernet services. Regional networks, and while in some respects you'd consider the ICN a regional network, but we also have starting to take place is some municipal fiber-based networks. In most cases, it's municipalities that run their own utilities and maybe have their own poles, or they have their own crew, and they have been installing fiber optics. And then in turn, those networks are feeding back into the ICN to bring that commodity internet and access to these educational resources for the schools and libraries and the healthcare. So both of these projects, we believe that both of these efforts kind of go hand in hand with that third challenge of reducing costs. These are the ways to get that higher speeds, the higher bandwidth, but also to drive down that per megabit cost.